women as something we're doing for women. I see aspiring male allies and some male leaders sort of framing the ally task or inclusive leadership this way. Hey, let's get together in kind of a siloed way and decide what we're going to do for the little ladies.
Mm,
Really cringeworthy, not the right approach versus how do we go there with our colleagues who happen to be
mm.
women? How do we listen? How do we get better with what Dave and I think of as gender intelligence, right? How do you learn?
Ooh, I
How do
like
you
that.
get sort of upskilled in your awareness of what
Mm,
women are encountering in the workplace? And then what would it look like if things improved, right? But to do this work well, we've got to collaborate. So away from the rescuing, away from, showing up and framing this as some sort of chivalrous activity that senior men are taking on. This is really about humbling myself, recognizing there's a lot I don't know about the experience of women. Let's do those world-class listening skills and listening sessions with women, and then let's do things like go to all the women's ERG meetings, right? Let
ooh,
me
I was
be
gonna ask you about ERG meetings and the place.
yeah.
What can we do with those to make those helpful?
What a great opportunity for me as a senior male leader to learn. I want to go. I want to learn. I want to hear from women in my organization what the headwinds happen to be, things I don't encounter and might not be aware of. That's how I'm really going to get better when I'm learning. So, this is also how a senior leader communicates to other men that, oh, yeah, this is part of your leader brand. You need to show up at these events and take these things seriously.
Right, right. I love that sense there at the end, Brad, the accountability, to like even as that example of the senior male leaders. And then as you're talking about structural, this is what this company does. This is how we show up for each
Yeah.
other. To be able to then somehow have that accountability, written in too. So that is a way that our men friends might not be as helpful as we wish. But David, what do men do well in terms of supporting each other and in supporting the women colleagues?
Yeah, it's a great question, and and I think it was one of the things as we started the research for Good Guys that I think in terms of surprises and things that left us feeling a lot of hope. And I hope we can leave that with the listeners here today is that there were so many great stories and examples of how individual men were showing up as meaningful allies and
Mm,
for the women that they worked with. And it's interesting. So in the research that we didn't mention this, but we did a lot of listening ourselves because we started out by interviewing women and listening to again what were the pain points, what were the things that were and the things that were working, and in those stories and examples, we would get examples of these positive examples of how men were showing up, and it was really making a difference. And so we get a chance to go back and then talk to those men. We did not interview any men who they didn't get to self-nominate. They had women were the ones giving us their names and nominating them for this. And so, it's probably not surprising, but a lot of these men have a lot of humility.
mm,
And they would actually even start out the conversation with us and feeling very humble that they were recognized for this and nominated to do the interview, but also that they didn't see that they were doing anything special. They looked at it as part of this is just part of who I am as a leader. This is
wow.
part of who I am as a person. It's part of my character. It's in some cases it had a moral undertone to doing what's right or best for
Mm,
people and taking care of people in the same way that I want them to do that for me. And so it was really interesting to hear the men talk about it that way. I think one of the things that so many of them told us, and clearly many of them were great listeners. We've talked a lot about listening, but the other part is that they were proactive as they began to listen and understand and see what was needed to create the change. They would be very proactive in doing that work and publicly doing that work. They weren't trying to hide it in any way.
mm,
They also recognized that they would make mistakes. And they did. And many of them shared all the different mistakes that they made along the way. And again, this is part of that humility. And I think the key piece, the takeaway that I think we talk to men about all the time is that you really have to be open to making mistakes and then receiving the feedback and
Mhm.
then being open to it, to show, to act actually out there almost seeking that feedback, because we can't learn about how well we're doing as allies unless we get the feedback and understanding, did that land properly? Did that work in the way? Did it have the right
I love that.
effect and impact that we want? And we find that this is one of the challenges that we see in the research today, is that we see more men talking about and wanting to be allies and and claiming that they're doing the work, yet we're not moving as fast as we would like to, or that we think
Mm,
we should. And part of that gap is a little bit of that is a lack of feedback. They're not getting the feedback, or they're not receiving the feedback in the way that they should. And so we do spend a lot of time talking about and thinking about how do allies show up and how do they receive feedback in a way and respond to feedback that shows that, wow, I really value that. I care, and I want more of that feedback, as opposed to just turning around and gaslighting a woman for giving him
right.
feedback.
Or saying, "I just do that." It reminds me of the data about, the extra caregiving roles in a home, and
Mhm.
interviewing, and the man saying, "Well, I do this much," and the woman saying, "Well, actually, I think you do this much," But
Right.
like, talk, right? We have to
Yeah.
talk and figure it out. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. Well, you actually see that there's this great research on the gap between men and women in the workplace and how they see frequency of
Mhm.
different ally behaviors. And men say,
mm,
"Oh yeah, I disrupt all the time, sexism." Women are saying, "Yeah, where do you work? I don't see that. I don't see men doing that here."
I would say we had some hockey example in a locker room recently and such. Yeah, like,
Yes, we did.
speaking up or
Yeah.
stopping some behavior. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if you would be ready for just like a few quick lightning round questions, and then just think through, something you didn't say that you just want to make sure it gets on the table, and then we will let our listeners go and continue our day. But I wonder, as we are thinking about these men leaders, probably, a senior leader, someone with some influence, with some power, and they are well intentioned. So I'll put all three questions together, and then you figure out, how you want to answer it. But he cares. I mean, I know that there's way more many. I mean, in my opinion, there's lots more men that want to do right by all relationships than men that are just trying to hog power and keep it all to themselves, right? So this man says, "I care, but I don't know what I don't know." So this is question one. What do you say to "I don't know what I don't know"? What is one thing he should stop doing immediately, and what is one thing he should start doing this week? How would you answer that? I don't know what I
Mm.
don't know. What should he
Yeah.
start? What should he stop?
Okay, number 1, stop assuming that everything is good with women in your
Mhm.
organization. Too many men in leadership assume everything's great, don't rock the boat. Things are not okay. Dave and I go into organizations all the time, conduct listening sessions with women. They'll tell you how things are actually going, and people don't ask them, or they don't feel safe sharing it with people in leadership in their own organization. So,
Mhm.
so don't accept and don't assume that everything's okay. Collect good data, interrogate that data, and when you're doing that interrogation of the data, looking at things like retention and commitment, and satisfaction on the part of employees, look at it, disaggregate it around race. How are women of color doing
Okay.
specifically? Don't assume that all women are having the same experience. Dig down and show that you're interested in the experiences of women that bring other cultural identities to the workplace.
Wow, so important. Thank you for adding that, Brad.
Three quick
Eh,
ones.
yep.
Clarity of message. Do you role model, and do you share your personal narrative about why this is important so that everybody else knows it? And
Mm,
again, men are very uncomfortable in many cases in sharing that personal narrative. Are you creating accountability across, not just for yourself, but for others in your organization? And so all of the leaders, they have to have accountability structures in place to do the work, right? How are they being held accountable? And can you explain that? And the third part's transparency. You need transparency across the organization in terms of how we're doing. So this data that Brad's talking about, everybody, not just